That you were able to join us today. Just to let you know a few housekeeping things. We are going to record today's informational webinar and we'll be posting it to the website. We will also post the slide deck, so you'll be able to refer back to that for any information that you need. There's also a ton of links embedded, so I encourage you to utilize those, especially as you are formulating your application materials. In addition, if you have questions related to the topic we're covering, please use the raise your hand tool, and we'll be happy to answer those as we go. If there's any questions that come up as we're going and we've already passed the topic, we'll have some Q&A at the end as well. Okay. Presentation pulled up here. Is it showing? Okay, our agenda for today, we're going to do some brief introductions, so you'll get to know your service providers that will be supporting you through the process. We're going to talk about the Land and Water Conservation Fund funding flow, the submission process. We'll go over some program resources, our grant timeline, eligibility, matching funds, the National Park Service documentation, any scoring documentation that you'll need, and our submission procedures. If you've submitted PARTF or LWCF or other grant applications through the Division of Parks and Recreation in the past, there are some changes to the process this year, and they'll be outlined in our presentation. So introductions, your service providers for, they'll be coordinating the Land and Water Conservation Fund opportunity for you are the North Carolina Division of Parks and Recreation and our Recreation Resources Service through North Carolina State University. And we'll do some introductions here for the Division of Parks and Recreation. I'm Candy Killian-Wood, and I will be assisting you primarily with coordinating your Land and Water Conservation Fund grant opportunity for this round and for future rounds. And then I will let Ms. Martin and Ms. Heaton introduce themselves.
So I will start. I'm Vonda Martin. I am the manager for grants and outreach for the Division of Parks and Recreation. Incorporated into that is the Land and Water Conservation Fund, along with the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant, the Accessibility for Parks grants, and any other LWCF opportunities, such as the Outdoor Recreation Legacy Partnership and the formula grants for local governments. Excited to have everybody with us today.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Lillian Heaton. I'm a grant specialist with the team, and I work primarily with PARTF and our AFPR state-funded grants.
Next, I'm going to turn this over to Charlene to talk about the Recreation Resources Service and her crew that she has that will be supporting you through the technical components of your application.
Yes, hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Charlene Smith. I'm the director of RRS, and we've recently reorganized our region, so you may have worked with somebody different before, and we also have 4 new staff members on board. So we're all coming up to speed like you with some of the LWCF funding and processes. I'm not sure who all is online, because I know some folks had, as new folks, there's some people doing some onboarding training today. So let's see, Trey Fouché. Okay, there's Brittany Ship. I'll let Brittany's on there. Brittany's in Southeast region down at Hammocks Beach State Park.
I know, I was going to say it's good practice for me to get used to saying I'm the Southeast region consultant instead of the Eastern region. So
she had the whole East Coast before.
Yes. So, but yeah, I'm Brittany Ship. I'm the Southeast region consultant with Recreation Resources Service. Coming up on four years with RRS, and look forward to helping anybody out in my region or beyond if needed as we're transitioning this looking to apply.
Great. Let's see, Trey Fouché online.
Good morning. I'm Trey Fouché, and I'm in the Central North region, and I'm looking forward. I'm new. I've been on the job maybe 6 weeks, 7 weeks, and I look forward to working with everybody in Central North and throughout the state.
Great. And Blake Covington, he's our new consultant in Western North Carolina.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, my name is Blake. I am the new consultant for the Western region, and I'm on start of week 3, so very new, but very excited to be here. So,
All right, and I think that's all. I think Alex Gadet has also works out of the Lake Norman office where Trey works. He has that Central South region, and Scott Payne is working out of our office here at NC State University and has the Northeast region. So we're your first point of contact. So please reach out to your regional consultant, and we'll be glad to get you started. We'll probably need to, we'll work with Candy and we'll find out what's needed to be done. But please call us and discuss any questions, anything you're considering applying for, and we can help you work through those to make sure it's a good fit with LWCF. All right, thanks, Candy.
Great, thank you. So I also have their email addresses. Again, we'll be providing the recording and posting the slide deck, so you'll have their direct information so you can get in touch with your RRS consultant. And if everyone would take just a brief moment to put in your information into the chat box, your email address and your organization, so that we can also send out the information directly to you today. While everyone's working on putting in your information in the chat box, I'm going to talk about the funding flow for Land and Water Conservation Fund. So the Land and Water Conservation Fund from the Land and Water Conservation Fund Act of 1965 is coordinated through the National Park Service. The National Park Service works directly with the North Carolina Division of Parks and Recreation. So that's our organizational unit. And then from there, we receive the funding comes directly to us, and then local governments are the grant recipients. So the big question today is how do you apply for Land and Water Conservation Fund? So let's talk about the submission process. So the notice of funding, the NOFO, you'll see up in the first box, comes from the National Park Service. And then you'll work directly with your RRS consultant for technical support. I cannot emphasize enough that they are an amazing resource for you into developing high quality materials that will increase your likelihood of receiving funding. So please utilize these specialists who can assist you with working through the deliverables and required documentation for your application. Once those come to, once you have your completed materials, those information is submitted to the Division of Parks and Recreation in a SharePoint site. And there's the information and how to get your SharePoint site will be provided in the slideshow. It's also on our website. And then that allows the RRS consultants and the Division of Parks and Recreation to work collaboratively with you as you develop your project. Once the deadline comes, we go through a scoring and ranking process. Again, that's the Division of Parks and Recreation, and RRS works collaboratively. And then once a project is complete and ready to be submitted, it is uploaded to the National Park Service, and they review and make funding decisions. If your project is awarded, then you're issued a state contract, and we work through the process of bringing your project to reality. If you're not awarded, then we encourage you to take your project back to your RRS consultant with your NPS feedback. and rework it. Applications are submitted on a ongoing basis, so you don't have to wait for a funding opportunity to begin a project. There are typically 3 grant rounds each year. And if you don't make it in one round, then we are highly supportive of you going back to and approving your project and submitting in a subsequent funding round. So you'll have some program resources. Again, these are hyperlinks that you'll have to utilize. I strongly encourage you to look through them if you haven't previously. The Land and Water Conservation Fund Manual, the LWCF forms that are required. There's been some changes in the last couple of years with the forms that are required to, for this, and we're going to talk about those primary ones today in more detail, but all the forms are also linked in this document. And then the most current notice of funding opportunity through grants.gov. You're always welcome. It's open to the public to look at those funding opportunities. And we are preparing not just for the one that's open, but for future rounds this year. The submission timeline, this is pulled directly from our website. So again, you can look there. It's also here for your quick reference. So the announcement came out in January. We're having our information webinar here on the 17th. If you, and again, we're strongly encouraging you to work directly with your RRS consultant. You need to get your preliminary materials to your RRS consultant by February 17th so that they have plenty of time to support you through any revisions to your documentation. And then your final documentation has to be submitted into SharePoint by March 17th for round 2. And by 5 p.m. I encourage you to reach out to get your SharePoint site set up as soon as possible in the process so we can begin working collaboratively with you and RRS. Do not wait to the last minute to do this because we want to ensure that we are fully supportive of you to increase your ability to receive funding. Round 3 can be for new applicants. It's also for applicants who aren't funded or who weren't ready to submit for round 2 funding. And again, making sure your items are to RRS for your application review by June 15th. And then to the Division of Parks and Recreation through SharePoint by July 15th. So eligibility, Land and Water Conservation Fund is a dollar-for-dollar matching grants to local governments with a maximum funding of LWCF of $500,000. So if your project is 1.2 million, you'll have to fund anything over the dollar-for-dollar match. Will have to come out of your matching funds. North Carolina counties and incorporated municipalities are eligible. Also federally recognized Native American tribes. Grants can be used to acquire land for a public park, to develop outdoor recreation and sport facilities, or a combination of both. You can also use it on previously funded land and water conservation funded parks for updates and to add recreational opportunities. Funded projects are reserved for public outdoor recreation in perpetuity. So this is a, we're excited to have these opportunities and to support you with reserving properties for outdoor public education, but it's something we want to emphasize. It's forever. So whereas part of his 25 years, Land and Water Conservation Fund projects are reserved for outdoor recreation forever. So make sure that you are doing due diligence, checking DOT plans, etc., so that you are thoroughly aware of making sure that the property that you're designating for land and water conservation funds is available for public recreation, outdoor recreation in perpetuity. So matching funds, again, it's you must match the grant with 50% and up to $500,000. Anything over that $500,000 must come for your matching funds. So if your project exceeds a $1 million cost, you're having to back up that rest of that funding. You must designate all of those funds for within your project, so it's really clear where the matching funding. Projects that don't designate or demonstrate that there is sufficient matching funding will not be funded. Matching funds can be cash on hand, private donations, bonds, other state or local grants that are allowed by the grantor. And then you cannot use other federal funds with the exception of community development grants, Safe, Accountable, Flexible, Efficient Transportation Equity Act, and Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act. So LWCF can't be used to match other federal funding opportunities. And with the exception of those three, you can't use other federal dollars to match LWCF grant funding. So let's talk about the core documentation components. These are items that are required specifically through the National Park Service for your application. You have your application and revision, which is Form 10904. You'll often hear people refer to it as the A&R. That's the application and revision form. Your project abstract summary, the project narrative, your location map, your land and water conservation boundary map, your SHPO documentation, your SF 424C budget for construction, and if it's an acquisition, we have other forms for that, and RRS and DPR will work with you on those alternative forms. Your budget narrative, proof of ownership, and pre-award site inspection report, which comes from RRS. So let's talk about the application and revision. So what we created here with part of the slideshow is to demonstrate what sections are filled out by the Division of Parks and Recreation and what is filled out by you, the local government, as the sub-grant recipient. So the cover sheet in section 1, A through C are completed by the Divisions of Park and Recreation. And I'll show you more details of what that looks like. Section 1D, 2, and 3 are completed by the local government. And then section 4 is for post award completion. So you don't have to memorize all this. Again, this slideshow will be a resource for you to go back through, especially if you haven't used these forms in a previous round. So application and revision form, again, this is the cover page. This is completed. The very first part is completed by the local government. And then section 1.0 is completed by the Division of Parks and Recreation. Section 1.0 A through C, which you can see here on the slide, B and C are on this page. That's completed by the Division of Parks and Recreation. So that's where we talked about the Division of Parks and Recreation covers the open project selection process and our ranking and scoring, and how it matches the SCORP priorities, and then how we completed the risk assessment for your project. And then you as a local government will complete section D, which is your financial assurances. Section 2 is completed by you, the local government. And that's where you're going to dig into the benefits of your project, how this particular funded project fits into any other planned project. So looking at your park site master plan will be imperative. One thing I do want to note through all of these documents that you'll be preparing is to ensure everything matches. So if you are going to add a boardwalk and a set of natural trails to your park, then you'll want to discuss the boardwalk, the natural trails in your narrative, in your A&R form or your application and revision form, and in your budget forms. You want to keep your language consistent and the same. RRS and DPR will be working with you on that, but that's one thing I really want to emphasize is that all of your documentation should match, and whether it's dollar amounts, your matching funds, your different elements of your project, that all of the language and items are matching throughout your application materials. So section 2.1 is for acquisition and development combination grants. So if you're not doing an acquisition, you do not have to fill out section 2.1. And just as a note, the SLO or ASLO signature, that's the state liaison officer or alternative state liaison officer signature, that's through the Division of Parks and Recreation. You don't have to chase anybody down for that. We'll take care of that on our side. And that's just a continuation with some notes as you go through and complete your materials. Again, this is completed if you're an acquisition and combination development. There must be an outdoor recreation amenity for the public within 3 years of grant closure. So as you're planning out your elements for your park, just be aware that your property and your park that's now being funded with Land and Water Conservation Fund opportunity has to have amenities for the outdoor public recreational use within 3 years. Again, this section is just a continuation of that 2.1, and that's completed by you as a local government. 2.2 is for development and combination grants. So if you have acquisition and development, then you need to complete both 2.1 and 2.2. If you only have development, you don't have to complete 2.1. That's for acquisition. You would complete 2.2. And again, your RRS consultant or the Division of Parks and Recreation can support you to ensure you've completed the required components of your application. 3.0 is site information. That's also completed by you as the local government. This is a continuation of 3.0. This gets into the stewardship considerations. Again, you want to make sure all of your materials are matching through all of these sections. So, and that you have, you are working closely with someone, especially when you get into the table sections of 3.0. These should be completed with a project manager, consultant, or someone with knowledge of environmental resources. Because you want to be really clear as you go through these items that what you're indicating is accurate. So your will have the hyperlinks to go through to check your NEPA or SEPA, which is the National Environmental Policy Act, or the NC State Environmental Policy Act, NEPA or SEPA. Both of those are be hyperlinked for your reference. And if you are preparing for future sites, write it into your project master plan. Again, continuation where it talks about your NEPA pathway. And then the cultural and historic resources review. We're going to talk about SHPO in just a little bit, but it's important if when you're completing your State Historic Preservation Office documentation for your site location, that anything that's indicated in that, whether it's follow-up for permits or specific types of materials that you're allowed to use based on what they've identified of historical significance on the property, that you also stipulate those things within your project application. So if they say you can only use a specific type of gravel on your natural path, then you need to make sure you stipulate that throughout your material so that there's no question that you understand your obligation to complying with your SHPO documentation. So the project narrative, applications must have a narrative description that includes your scope of work, your timeline with anticipated benchmarks, and planned results or outcomes of the project. There should be sufficient detail to help support the review of the budget. Again, all the pieces need to match up. On this, there's not a specific form. We do ask that you use a minimum 10-point font or larger with 1-inch margins with your application materials. Project abstract summary. There is a specific form for this. The form, access to the form is hyperlinked. The project abstract summary form, and this does seem repetitive and redundant. You need to make sure your project narrative and your project abstract summary mirror each other, since they contain very similar information, but you are required to have both of them. You'll include the funding opportunity number, goals and objectives for your proposed project, summary of project activities, performance goals, including your milestones and expected outcomes, and who will benefit from your project. So the project narrative and project abstract information should contain the same information. One's just on a document that you create, the other is on the NPS form. Project location map. Each project location map should include the name of the park, the address of the park, and the latitude and longitude coordinates. And then you have your LWCF boundary map. LWCF elements will be in light green, the park boundaries in red, any existing facilities in white, future facilities in orange, and utility easements in yellow. Please make sure you identify any of these, especially utility easements or other things that we or the NPS needs to take into consideration when developing your LWCF boundary map. And here's a sample is included here for your reference. So SHPO documentation, the State Historic Preservation Office. Again, where you see SHPO documentation, that's hyperlinked, that'll take you directly to the State Historic Preservation Office's page, which gives you all the details and how to obtain your SHPO documentation for your project application. This is probably one of the first things you want to jump on. So if you already have a project in mind, I would highly recommend you start that process rolling. It can take up to 30 days, if not more, to obtain your SHPO documentation. And then if there's anything, follow-up activities as a result of your SHPO that may impact your project or require further action, that can impact your ability to submit a completed packet by the timeline. So please, it says start 30 days. If you have a project in mind, I would encourage you to get that done as quickly as possible to get that ball rolling. There's a sample SHPO letter here as well, but the hyperlink will take you to their page and will give you all the step-by-step instructions and how to obtain your SHPO documentation.
Candy, this is Charlene. Can I add
Yes.
something on the SHPO?
Sure,
I
absolutely.
know in the past, some folks have had, like, if you've previously had work done at this site, or even like an archaeological review or any kind of review, even a previous review by SHPO for a grant maybe a few years ago, include that information when you send it down to their office. That could speed things up if you already have that.
That's an excellent point. Thank you, Charlene. So your 424C budget for construction, and again, if you're doing acquisition only, there'll be alternative forms to this, but many of our projects we found do require some type of development or construction. So we just wanted to point this one out for you today. Anything you see underlined in our presentation is a hyperlink. So please take advantage of all the hyperlinks we put for the resources to help you be successful. The 424C document is used to for budget construction projects, and there are great instructions for completing this form that's available with at grants.gov website. Any of their forms typically have set of instructions that go with them. Other budget formats cannot be accepted, so please either utilize the 424C or the alternate budget form if your project is acquisition only. Your budget narrative, again, all your pieces need to match. So your budget narrative should be reflected clearly in your 424C or alternate form and throughout the rest of your project description, project narrative materials. Provide a narrative description that clearly identifies and details the cost items proposed to be included in the project budget. So this is where you get to give the details. The cost should align with the scope of work presented in the project narrative in the application and revision form. There should be sufficient detail to help support the review and determination on all cost categories. Unit costs should be provided for all budget items. Cost categories can include, but are not limited to, those cost items that are listed in your 424 forms. So proof of ownership, every project must include evidence of site control. And I know if you've done part of or other LWCF grants, this is not a new requirement. So we need to see the deed and that the applying entity, the local government or other entity has site control. If it's acquisition, we can work with you through those requirements. If a project is awarded, you will have to amend your deed for the deed restriction, and there's specific language that goes in that basically reserves the property for outdoor recreational use available to the public in perpetuity. So you agree when you take the funding that the property is reserved forever for outdoor recreation, and you will be required to do a deed amendment if it isn't already set up in your deed. Pre-award site inspection, that is completed by your RRS consultant. Charlene, do you have anything that you would like to add for the pre-award site inspection?
Hang on, I was finding my mic mute button there. No, just to know that your consultant, part of the information you provide about where the site is located, the information, they will come by. We're just checking the site, confirming that so that we understand what you're proposing to build on the site. Sometimes, it's back and forth whether they will contact you. Sometimes, depending on our schedule and the number of inspections we have to do, they may just go by and see it without touching base. But if there are any questions, I know they'll get on the phone and call you. So that's the main thing.
Thank you.
We have a question in the chat. Does land acquisition without immediate development qualify?
So you have to, so we have a question in the chat box. Does land acquisition with no immediate plans for development? Remember, you have to have it available for outdoor public amenities for the public to use for outdoor recreation within 3 years. So while you may just be using acquisition funding for LWCF to purchase the property, you do need to have a plan to be able to launch that park property with outdoor recreation amenities for the public within 3 years. So even if you're using other funds to cover those elements, still needs to be done in 3 years. So scoring documentation, and if your entity has submitted a PARTIF grant or other grants in the past, these should be very familiar items for you. You need to have a park or greenway site master plan, the evidence of approval of your master plan that your local government has approved, that's their vision and their plans for that particular piece of property. A comprehensive system-wide plan for parks and recreation, so your municipality comp plan, evidence that has been approved, your capital improvement plan for parks and recreation, and then your survey of recreational needs. We can, your RRS consultant will be able to support you through if you don't have these items developed, but these are key components in our office, and as we're working with RRS to evaluate, score, and rank your project so that we can then submit your materials to the National Park Service. If these aren't put together, then it dramatically reduces your ability to receive funding through the Land and Water Conservation Fund. So these are, while not required by the National Park Service, it is required for us to complete our scoring, ranking, and risk assessment. So how do you submit? We try to make the process, I know in years past with other grant opportunities, you've mailed a USB drive and a packet of materials here or hand deliver them. We wanted to simplify that and give you the ability to maximize your time and to facilitate more efficient and effective communication between the RRS consultants, you and the Division of Parks and Recreation. So we are accepting applications through our SharePoint portal. The way to get your SharePoint portal, and I've already had some folks reach out this weekend when they saw the notice of funding come out to ask for their SharePoint portal. Just pop me an email and send me the list of names and email addresses of individuals you would like to have access to your portal. This prevents anybody else from going in and interacting with your materials. Your RRS consultant will also be granted access to your folder so that you can work through feedback and revisions to your materials more efficiently with them and with us. We'll all be on the same page, able to see the same materials. That will also give you up until really the 5 o'clock deadline on our deadline dates of March 17th or July 15th for your final submission. So you don't have to worry about anything getting messed up in the mail or anything like that. This will should enable you. If you have any technical issues with your SharePoint site, do not hesitate to reach out to me. We will be offering some SharePoint training just to support those of you who may not have used SharePoint before to upload documents. So we'll be offering those in the future. And if you need additional support, I am happy to make myself available to support you to ensuring that this is the submission process is the easiest part of applying for Land and Water Conservation Fund opportunities. So just a quick reminder of the submission process. We have the notification of funding. You work with RRS for your technical support The final forms are definitely in that SharePoint folder to the Division of Parks and Recreation. Then we work with RRS to score, evaluate, and complete our risk assessment. We submit it to National Park Service, who reviews and makes decisions on funding. And then, of course, if you're awarded, you get a state contract, and we support you through the launch of your project. And then if you are not awarded, we go back with that NPS feedback. You work with your RS consultant and get ready for a subsequent round. And then don't forget, your folks at RS are your support, primary support, tech support through this process. All right, any questions?
Great job,
Oh,
Candy. I
yeah,
did
it's all
want to,
quiet.
sorry, I did want to mention one thing, and maybe you could speak to this, but let's just say, for example, that it's $1 million project and you submit everything great, NPS funds you, and then in your project, for some unknown reason, you save money. And so let's say that you only spend 400,000 of your 500,000, you will only get 400,000 from the National Park Service reimbursed. So if you think you're doing great by saving money on your project, you get up to $500,000. So if you come in under budget, it will decrease your reimbursement from the National Park Service. And I hope that made sense.
Yeah, that was one thing I was thinking about too, Vonda. This is Brittany with RRS. The difference, I know in years past, there's been a lot of kind of gray area meshing together of LWCF and PARTF. And I think it's really important that we continue to get away from doing that, because there are a lot of differences when it really boils down to it. And just specifically on, piggybacking off what you said, the donated value bargain sales are not recognized with LWCF. So I think that's something that's good to remember as well. It's only full donation of property that's can be used.
Yeah, we didn't really get into the land acquisition components of LWCF. So if you do have a land acquisition only project, make sure you get with your consultant to get the finer details of that. But we would definitely be able to support you as well, but they are also well versed in knowledge of land acquisition only projects.
Hey, this is Josh in Black Mountain. Having never applied for an LWCF grant before, I do have a question about the deadlines. I know you mentioned round 2 and round 3 and that sort of thing. I'm just curious, what are the hard deadlines? Like, what exactly does that mean?
So we have specific timelines for each round to have our project materials submitted to the National Park Service. So for example, for the March 17th deadline to us, so that's not all your work that you're going to do with your RRS consultant. We need it by March 17th so that we can complete your risk assessment and do our ranking so that we can meet the National Park Service deadline, which is April 17th. So if something comes up, especially closer to the deadline, you have a concern or an issue, don't hesitate to reach out to us. As I mentioned earlier, we can accept, like if you already had a project you're working on, let's pretend you're already done, you have something you want to submit. You can always submit even outside of a cycle. And we go through our process with you. The big deadlines are really for folks who are using matching funding from like PARTF or other opportunities where you need your money to align. Because if you don't receive like your matching funds, say you applied for PARTF to be your matching and you don't receive that PARTF money, then that's going to impact your land and water conservation fund, and you need those monies to align closely because they both have their restrictions on the amount of time you have to bring the project to fruition.
So if I was going to apply, I would need to have everything done essentially by March 17th.
If you want to go in a round 2, if you're not ready, that'll go in the next round. There's typically 3 rounds each year. And again, unless your match has some type of restrictions where you need your monies to align, we can work you through. Like, our goal is to ensure that your project elements and all your documentation is of the highest quality it can be, so you're more likely to receive funding. So if it takes longer because you don't have those contingencies of matching funds, then that's preferable to go into a next round and be more likely to be funded than to try to rush through to meet a deadline.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and great questions, Joshua. And I believe that if you have a project in mind and you want to start working on your forms in your SharePoint, as soon as you have completed those and had conversations with RRS so that we know what your project is and you know, get it in, we'll review it as quickly as we can with the consultant, give you feedback on that so that you can update it. And we'll put it in a portal where we will also share that with our National Park Service contact, and they will begin their review. So the timeline is really, like Candy said, unless you have your matching funds is another grant and there's stipulations for time requirements on it. Get your stuff in, we'll review it, we'll get it in the portal, we'll get you some NPS feedback, and we'll just keep working through the process until you're approved. And then you can, then if you want to do it backwards and you want to secure LWCF and then move through PARTIF, you can also do that.
Thanks, Vonda.
Yeah, Vonda and Kenny, this is Charlene. Just one other point on the timeline. So if there's a contract start date, and any expenses or anything that you do prior to that contract start date would be an ineligible expense. So that's part of it as well. So make sure you know when that date is, if you have other funding, kind of what that timeline is of when expenses are eligible. That's important to know. And you're welcome to sit down. Sometimes we just have to sit down and talk through it and kind of map it out. And we're glad to do that.
Any other questions? Well, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. We'll be sending out the slide deck, and we'll post the slide deck and recording on our website. Please utilize the human resources that are available to you as you go through your project. We're all excited. We're passionate about Land and Water Conservation Fund, and we love to support communities and providing their outdoor recreational opportunities through the funding. So please utilize the resources you have available. And if you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate to reach out. All right. Have a great day.